in Matthew chapter 1. And we're just kind of hopping a little bit. There are actually 40 different generations happening here in chapter 1. And so what we're specifically looking for as we're jumping through Jesus' lineage is to see the different black sheep that God has included inside of Jesus' family tree. Just with the reminder of the fact that at any time, God can do exactly what He wants. And at any time, He can choose who is a part of Jesus' family tree, but He leaves these people in. And what I've noticed is, as you're reading and you try to find information about each different person in the Bible, it may mention them as a descendant. It may mention their name, but there's usually not a ton of information about them, all 40 of them, right? But for some reason, God gives us quite a bit of information about certain ones, and the certain ones, well, they have some pretty risque stories. To name a few, last week we talked about Jacob's deceitfulness. There also is later coming up murder, prostitution, abandonment, adultery, and those are just to name a few different things, different stories that had happened inside Jesus' family tree. And so, as I said before, it's really neat how God does not delete those stories from the Bible. He does not hide those stories. He actually shows His redemption, His love, and His their surrender into being a part of God's story to our ultimate Redeemer, Christ. What we can see in these people's stories is that although they may have had an interesting past, they might have made some poor decisions, they might have had some things done to them out of their power, God did not let their past decisions deem their future goodness, success, part of Jesus' lineage. And I can find comfort in that this morning because I don't know about you, but I have not had a perfect past either. Okay? And so it gives me comfort to know that God can use and redeem anyone for His purpose, and that it is possible. All things are possible through Him. If you look at Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "This is the record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah, a descendant of David and of Abraham." Verse 2, Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. And Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram, and I'm not going to keep reading all of these names, all right? But what I want you to see right here is actually the first female that's even mentioned is Tamar. And I honestly have never studied about Tamar. I don't think that I've ever preached about Tamar. Her story is so tiny, and it's tucked right in the middle of Joseph's story. And Joseph gets a lot of attention in the Bible, right? Like his brothers sold him into slavery. His father gave him a coat of many colors. There's all of this stuff about Joseph, but there's just this little snippet that the Bible inserts, and it goes like this. It goes, Joseph, 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 and while all of this is happening, there's this little story about his brother Judah, and then Joseph, Joseph, and so on. Okay? And so, Judah is actually the brother that is in the line of Jesus, which is interesting because Judah is number 4. And if you continue reading on about Judah, the first 3 brothers God did not see as good people at all. And you can see as you're reading about what all things they did to Joseph, that Judah, the 4th brother, is actually in the lineage of Jesus. I think it says in Isaiah that he'll raise from the line of Judah. And so Judah actually, although quite often Judah follows his brothers and makes poor decisions, eventually in different areas of that story you can see Judah have a little bit of common sense and pop in and be like Judah's the one that steps in and says, hey guys, let's not kill Joseph, let's just sell him into slavery. Still not a great choice, but he saves his brother from being murdered. Okay? So Judah, although he follows in line with some poor decisions and allows the group to influence his direction, he still has some goodness inside of him where he stops situations and he's like, let's think about this a minute. Let's move in a different direction. Okay? So in Genesis chapter 38, which we'll read in just a minute, I'm going to paraphrase, but it says that Judah has 3 sons. And the first son is maybe I don't know. And it says is a wicked man. But marries a girl named Tamar. And so Tamar is there married to a wicked man, so I can only imagine how her beginning of her marriage probably is going. And it says that was so wicked, God just took his life. So that's pretty bad, okay? So in that time, it is law. It is literal law that if a husband dies and leaves a widow, that his brother has to marry the widow. Now me, as an American, looking at that, I'm like, that's a little strange. Because I have a son who's married, okay? And he's married to Olivia, and I have another son, Cade. And so the way Jewish law would have been back then is if something happened to Titus, then therefore it would be Cade's duty in life to marry Olivia. Okay? And so we can look at that, and that's a little weird, right? That's a little strange for us. We don't do that here. But for them, it actually was like a redemptive thing. It was a kinsman redeemer. Like somebody from the family is going to now take care of this woman, because widows were often, they were poor. They had no money. They weren't even allowed to inherit the land that they and their husband ran. Like they were basically just destitute. And so his brother Onan, it was his job to marry Tamar and take her on. And so Judah insists, Onan marries Tamar, but Onan inside his heart, it says, is also a bad man. And he's like, I'm not about to give her a baby. No way in the world will she have a baby of mine and be able to call it my brother's. That's not happening. And so here's Tamar stuck in her second marriage, and it's not going well, okay? And so God actually takes his life too. And so she's 2 for 2 on widow here, all right? So there's only one boy left, and his name is Shelah, and Shelah's very young. And Shelah is not ready for marriage. And so Judah tells Tamar, you go back home to your father's house so that you are taken care of. And when Shelah grows up, then he'll be your redeemer, and he'll take care of you, okay? And so then in verse 11 it says that she did go back home, and she lived as a widow. So she couldn't actually go back in a normal state. She had to wear all of the black garb, a veil. She had to isolate. She had to be away from people. She had to be in mourning. And then in verse 12 it says, some years later, Judah's wife now passes away. Some years later, Bible scholars estimate her some years later to be 19 years. 19 years, this woman Tamar, who was young and in the prime of her life, right, when she's now widowed to two different guys, and she's been waiting for 19 years to be able to marry the third son. But Judah, who doesn't always make good decisions, has never intended on this to happen. He's already lost two sons, and he's not about to have another one marry this gal, because something may happen to him too. And so, if we pick up in verse 13 of Genesis chapter 38, I encourage you to go back and read around this. There's a lot happening. It's a fantastic story. I'm not going to read all of it this morning. But it says in verse 13, it says, someone told Tamar, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So while she's waiting, some years later, somebody tells Tamar, hey, your father-in-law is coming to town. So you can imagine some hope happening of, finally, it's time, right? Like finally. And then it says, no wait, he's going to go shear his sheep. And Tamar was aware that Shelah had grown up, but no arrangements had been made for her to come and marry him. So she changed out her widow's clothing and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. And then she sat beside the road at the entrance of the village of Anim, which is on the road of Timnah. And Judah noticed her and thought she was a prostitute, and since she had covered her face, so he stopped and propositioned her. Let me have sex with you, he said, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. How much will you pay me? How much will you pay to have sex with me? Tamar asked. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, Judah promised. Times have changed, yes? Times have changed. But what will you give me to guarantee that you will send the goat? She asked. What kind of guarantee do you want? He replied. And she answered, leave me your identification seal and its cord and a walking stick you're carrying. So Judah gave them to her, and then he had intercourse with her, and she became pregnant. Afterwards, she went home, took off her veil, put on her widow's clothing as usual. Now, I'm looking at this story, and I'm thinking this is a very interesting story, right? Like, there's all kinds of crazy happening here, okay? This woman who has been set aside, disowned, unwanted, labeled, all the things for 19 years, is waiting for the day that finally somebody comes and rescues her. Finally she can have the family she's always dreamed of having. Finally somebody sees her, and you know she's praying day after day after day, like God is today, like God surely today, God surely today. And in comes her father-in-law, who could have been the redeemer at the time, and he's going through some things, and like we said, Judah makes poor decisions sometimes. And so because she is dressed in covered face, he sleeps with her, and she gets pregnant. All right? And so this is a very racy story, right? Like, a lot of people think, it amazes me how people think church people are like always so perfect, how they couldn't be like church people. And the truth is if when you look at Scripture, like, there's all kinds of crazy happening here. Right? Like, this is a very racy story that probably, honestly, I've not ever taught on it because it is quite interesting, and I just had not discovered what's happening here. We can see Tamar is stuck in an impossible situation. And when you look at this story, Immediately, my original thought before I looked into this anymore is, whoo, Tamar's a bad girl, right? Like something's going on with Tamar. Like that was sneaky. She shouldn't have done that. It's not good. And so immediately I label Tamar as this is a problem, Tamar, right? I literally heard a pastor call Tamar a hoe before. Like, I literally have heard that come out of a man of God's mouth. Like, she gets a bad rap. But let's look at it in her eyes, okay? Here she is, this woman, who has been cast off, unwanted, labeled all this time. She's doing her house duties. She's working. She's wearing her widow's clothes all the time for 20 years probably. And she's feeling left. She's feeling alone. I would say that I would be depressed. You would feel isolated. You would feel like God's not seeing you. You would just start feeling like it is outright impossible. And you might think, well, that might be a little much, like that might be a little dramatic. I've been dramatic for way less than 20 years. Are you kidding? Like 20 days. And I'm like, come on, God. Like I'm not making it here. I'm struggling. Like you've got to show up, right? We are used to a right now culture. Right? Like, we're drive-through Christians. We want Jesus on demand. I want the app. I want to punch my order. We can't even go into Walmart and shop anymore, right? Like, somebody's got to go shop for us. We want things so fast. And every year, we want it faster. We develop technology faster. So how can we get it done? How can we save time? Our culture just is speeding up and up and up and up. But God does not run on our timeline. And that is what is so hard. That's why it seems so impossible. Because He runs on His timeline. It would have been great, like when girls, guys, when you are young and like 16, 18, when you're that age. When I was that age, I thought, man, look at me. I look horrible. My body's awful. And now I look back at me at that age and I was like, what was I thinking? Those were probably the best years of my life on physically, right? And our minds, like we can't grab that. But this woman, in her mind, is wasting, I'm sure, the best years of her life. Doing nothing and not getting the family and nobody's seeing her. And so, although she gets such a bad rap for the way she went about it and tricking her father-in-law to be her redeemer, Tamar actually was doing a biblical, lawful thing. Because at any time, she could have been dishonoring to this family. But she chose to be faithful. And she never remarried or she never skipped out on the situation. She never went with another guy. And we know that because her story continues, and in verse 24, it says this. It says, about 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law has acted like a prostitute, and now because of this, she's pregnant. Bring her out and let her be burned, Judah demanded. Oh, harsh, right? The woman who you have cast out, you went to her town and didn't go by and say hi to your daughter-in-law, right? The woman who you've not cared about, and you definitely don't want her to touch any more of your kids because she has this whatever she touches goes bad. And now she's pregnant, and he feels like she must have done it unlawfully. And if you commit adultery outside of the marriage, then you all of a sudden, you get to be stoned. You get to be burned. It's bad news for you, okay? And so Judah assumes immediately that she has done things wrong, and she is the bad guy here. Just like everybody else, he's joining in. And it says in verse 25, it says, "But as they were taking her out to kill her, she sent a message to her father-in-law, 'The man who owns these things made me pregnant. Look closely. Whose seal and cord and walking stick are these?' Judah recognized them immediately and said, 'She's more righteous than I am, because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son Shelah.' And Judah never slept with Tamar again." Tamar went about it in a very unique way, but because she thought ahead on how to receive her payment and took his ID, right? Took his walking stick, took his special cord, he would know those items. And as they are getting ready to take her out and stone her to death and burn her, she's like, "Take these to my father-in-law and show him who this baby belongs to." And as soon as he sees it, his eyes are opened. And he's not mad at Tamar. He's immediately upset with himself that he did not do what he should have. You see, Judah's slow sometimes to answer, but he's a good guy down deep. And so he comes to realization that she wasn't the bad guy at all. This entire time, it was him who was not following God's will. Sometimes our situations, the places that we're in, the impossible that we seem to be stuck in, are our fault. They're things that we have done. They're choices that we have made, like Jacob last week. Jacob was deceitful. Jacob was sneaky towards his dad and stole his brother's birthright. And so Jacob, therefore, had to run away and live 14 years away from his family and basically pay for his decisions. Sometimes that is the way it happens. Other times, we're stuck in the impossible, not due to anything that we did, like Tamar. Tamar did nothing wrong here. She was forced to marry a man who was a bad guy, and God took him out. And then she was forced to marry the brother, who was also a bad guy, and God took him out. And then she was forced to go back home and live in isolation, separation, labeled a widow, but like no family, lost the best years of her life, it would seem. And she was isolated and cast out, like she didn't get to do all the other things that everybody else got to do. And it wasn't anything her fault. She never made these decisions. The more important thing, like sometimes it is our decisions, our repercussions. Sometimes it's not anything that we did. It's just bad things happen to us. But the more important thing that we need to pull from this is God can work in both. Right? God. Whoa. God's in charge. scripture of Tamar and Jacob. God takes care of us regardless if we put ourselves in that spot or not. He sees us and He knows what we need. And guys, sometimes that age-old question, why does bad things happen to good people? I don't know that answer. But I can see in Scripture over and over again it happening from the beginning of time. This is Genesis. And how God still works in it and through it. No matter how you got in your situation, what struggle you are stuck in, if it was your decision or if it's somebody else's poor decisions, it doesn't matter how you got there. It just matters that God is there with you. And He's your shepherd, and He wants to walk with you through it. And if it seems like it's been eternity, it maybe has been eternity. It could be my eternity of 20 days. It could be my real eternity of 20 years. But God will walk with us through it. I heard this song for the first time. Maybe I've read it in the past, but Tanner and I were watching The Chosen series coming out. And there's a psalm inside of there that is read to David. And it's this choir. They come into the room and they're like, we have this organized as a choir. David, I want you to hear this song, okay? And as I was listening to this psalm on The Chosen, you can find this on YouTube if you want to. I don't know if you've seen The Chosen, but it's wonderful. But this is the psalm scripture in verse 77, okay? And it says, I cry out to God, yes, I shout. Oh, that God would listen to me. When I was in deep trouble, I searched for the Lord. All night long I prayed with hands lifted toward heaven, but my soul was not comforted. I think of God and I moan, overwhelmed with longing for His help. You don't let me sleep. I'm too distressed even to pray. I think of the good old days long since ended. When my nights were filled with joyful songs, I searched my soul and pondered the difference now. Has the Lord rejected me forever? Will He never again be kind to me? Is His unfailing love gone forever? Have His promises permanently failed? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has He slammed a door on His compassion? Now, if we stopped right there, that would be a really sad psalm, wouldn't it? It would be, there's no good news there, okay? But it shifts here in just a second, and it says, as I said, this is my fate. The Most High has turned His hand against me. But then I recall all You've done, O Lord. I remember Your wonderful deeds of long ago. They are constantly in my thoughts. I cannot stop thinking about Your mighty works. O God, Your ways are holy. Is there any God as mighty as You? You are the God of great wonders. You demonstrate Your awesome power among the nations. By Your strong arm, You redeemed Your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. When the Red Sea saw You, O God, its waters looked and trembled. The sea quaked to its very depths. The clouds poured down rain. The thunder rumbled in the sky. Your arrows of lightning flashed. Your thunder roared from the whirlwind The lightning lit up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your road led through the sea. Your pathway through the mighty waters. The pathway no one knew was there. You led your people along that road like a flock of sheep, with Moses and Aaron as their shepherds. If we stopped that psalm at the beginning, it would be pretty bleak. There's no hope there. I'm up all night, I'm praying, I'm struggling. But what they do in that psalm that is comforting is if you find yourself in this vicious cycle of, I can't do anything, nobody wants me, I always mess up, this never is going to end. Those infinite phrases that we love to use in our life. What this psalm shows me is that it's not true. And I know this to be not true because I know of things in my past. When I get stuck in a, this can't happen, this is not possible, all I have to do is stop and think for a moment. He's delivered in the past. He's showed up great other times. He's never let me down. He's always given me something to share as a gospel message. Not one time ever has He not been dependable. Did it happen in my time frame? Rarely, no. But it happened at the right time frame. And that's what we have to trust. If you find yourself in this cycle of never, always, try to remind yourself of a time that God did deliver. A time that God showed up in maybe the littlest way possible, but you know beyond a shadow of a doubt it was Him, and it could have only been Him. And that is what we have to focus on, or we get back stuck in that beginning cycle. Like at the beginning of this Psalm, chapter 77, we can get stuck in the negative and the what's not working and the frustration and the impossible and the eternity and this is taking forever and it's a vicious cycle, right? And if you stay on that cycle, boy, it goes downhill fast. We all get in that cycle. But if we can just stop ourselves, and sometimes it takes a verbal no, Satan. That's not who my God is. Because this one time, and I know for a fact, God showed up and He delivered and He did it, and there's nobody else could have done it but Him. That is where we can find our confidence and be reminded that God works in the impossible. What we have deemed impossible, all things are possible through Him. You guys want to stand up?